Hello and welcome to Psyched, the show where we explore psychedelics through social, economic, and political perspectives. We have Ashley Southard and Talia Eisenberg. Co-founder of Ibogaine Research Institute, Ashley is a forward-thinking operator with a history of running large corporations that bring the strength of a stable foundation for systems to businesses. With a background in arts, she values higher purpose and has experienced firsthand the importance of wellness programs, mental health support, and integration therapy for the true future of success, higher consciousness. Ashley and Ibogaine Research Institute are launching iboguide.me, a safe resource for the public to aid in decision-making for the growing demand in ibogaine treatments and aftercare. Having been given a new direction in life as a result of ibogaine and post-integrative therapy in 2010, Talia has become a passionate advocate for both people and planet. She has a proven track record as a successful entrepreneur and operations leader of a venture-backed startup, Henley LLC, which helped disrupt big tobacco. Most recently, backed by HTC, Talia developed a VR mindfulness application for stress reduction in corporate settings. Talia is a heart-based, outside-of-the-box strategic thinker with a vast understanding of the holistic wellness industry. Talia received her master's certification as a practitioner of energy medicine in 2017. Her work has appeared in the Huffington Post, New York Times, and Wall Street Journal. Ashley and Talia, welcome to Psyched.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you? Is Talia on yet?
Yes, let us just, I think she's being promoted to a panelist, and here she comes.
Yay. We're apart. We were together last week.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Hey, what's up, Talia? How are you?
How are you? Thanks for having us on. We're excited to chat.
Definitely.
We were going to share a presentation, but I think we'll just do this casually.
Definitely. Well, I'd love for you both to, I gave a little bit of an introduction. I'd love for you both to talk a little bit more either about yourselves or maybe even starting off with the Ibogaine Research Institute, the mission behind it and what y'all are working on there.
I think it'd be good for Talia, you to share your story and then we can discuss, I guess, how we got into this and the importance of it. Does that sound good? That sounds perfect.
Great. I'm having a little bit of internet trouble, but anyhow, so yeah, my name's Talia Eisenberg. So 10 years ago, by the time I was 22 or something, I had adopted an opiate addiction, was living in New York City, was living really fast, had an art gallery, surrounded by a lot of people that were suffering. I was suffering deeply. I went to multiple rehabs over a 2-year period, tried that model, and really none of them worked. And I was lucky, I only did opiates probably for 2 years, but and my parents were amazing. They kept pushing me into rehabs. They were worried I was going to die. And a friend at the time in New York City, who I used to do a lot of drugs with, looked great. And he said to me, there's this thing called Ibogaine, you should try it. Because I really wanted to get sober, but I was powerless. I couldn't stop. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't stop. It felt like something neurological. I'd be sober for about, 3 weeks or something. Even hired people to follow me around to help keep me sober, had sober coaches, everything, all of that, and couldn't stop. So then, heard about Ibogaine, went to a clinic in Mexico, and had a profound awakening in a single night and basically was reborn, so there was in addiction, there's the aspect of the spiritual malady, but then there's also the neurological, physiological piece. And so I was essentially reset, but then I also found my purpose and mission in life, and which was I went from being sort of a zombie and somewhat of a taker in the world and not knowing who I was. I come from a family of Holocaust survivors, so a lot of intergenerational trauma, lots of guilt, lots of shame, and I couldn't access that as a young child. And was able to access that and had this profound awakening, and then had no desire to use anymore. However, the experience itself was not great. The place I went to, although I'm extremely grateful to have found the medicine and have been, I haven't used a drug since then, by the way. I had no alcohol, no opiates, nothing, no cocaine for 10 years. So that it was a miracle in that sense, but the treatment providers were not of the highest ethics. There was weird things happening in that house. They claimed there would be a doctor there, you know, along with a spiritual guide. There was no doctor. There was weird meth drug use. Like, it was not the right kind of an environment. There was odd things happening there. It was not safe. You know, when you do Ibogaine, you're being reset and your mind's very malleable. So it was a very strange experience. However, I stayed sober and quickly left that environment. It's a long story, but, you know, flew back to America. And from then on, always said, I'm going to come back to this, help to make this more accessible and safe, most of all, safe to the masses of people. Most people can't afford to go to Mexico. And if they can, you know, it should be done properly, and it should be done in a way that doesn't harm people. So that was always my mission. And after that, you know, I started a company. It was built around harm reduction. It was venture backed. It did well, always with the mission to help reduce suffering, harm reduction. All of these companies that I've started, whether it's VR meditation or our latest company that we have, we represent top consciousness leaders and healers. It's called healercollective.com. We're essentially like the business development and agent behind the scenes, you know, but the goal really is to empower the masses so that they can heal themselves. So anyways, that happened. And then long story short, I got an MBA, business school, sustainability, and always wanted to come back to this plant that gave me my life back. I believe I would be dead without it. So here we are 10 years later, and there's a psychedelic renaissance. You know, a lot of changes are being made. Investors are open to funding this now where they weren't in the past. And essentially what Ibogaine Research Institute was born to do is to bring awareness, to the opiate crisis in America. I think in the last month, there's been more overdoses than any months in the last 10 years because of COVID. And it's a terrible problem that not a lot of people are talking about, right? And it is a disease, and there's lots of funding for it, but by the government, but it's not effective. So there's that, and then, you know, trying to bring awareness to Ibogaine, and we're launching a public campaign that will do that. So we're marketers, and essentially that's our background, but our goal is to create these public campaigns that draw attention to both the opiate crisis and shift policy there, and also draw attention to, you know, most people don't know what Ibogaine is. You know, you have like Lamar Odom is about to come out with a documentary on a friend of ours is creating a documentary about him and how he got sober, and that's going to target the mainstream demographic. And then you're going to have a bunch of people, 20, 30-year-olds who are addicted to Oxycontins, mainstream America, who, you know, are going to be interested in Ibogaine, and they're not going to know where to go. And there's this problem of a lack of safety and, you know, safety in the Ibogaine world. And so there's going to be a great demand with not a lot of great options, and most importantly, not a lot of aftercare also, which is very important. It's part of why I'm still sober. I do a lot of spiritual daily practices to keep clean spiritually with myself and live clean and be of service to others and all that. So I'll stop talking, but that's part of why I'm here, what we're doing, and why I'm so passionate. And I'll let Ashley speak. Thank you.
So I'll pick it up from here. Thank you, Talia, for basically communicating it all. Talia's my business partner in Healer Collective, and this is our nonprofit baby, I guess you could say. Everything we do is around accessibility. So with Healer Collective, it is empowering people to heal, and it is making that healing accessible to the general public. Now, Ibogaine is not accessible, first because it's illegal, but second because, I mean, outside of this psychedelic sphere where we all, for the most part, know what Ibogaine is, the general public doesn't. You can ask anybody in like the grocery store line, and chances are they don't know what Ibogaine is. So what's interesting is that opioid addiction kills over 70,000 people a year. Prostate cancer kills 30,000, breast cancer kills 45,000. You have there's so much public awareness around that, but there isn't that much awareness around opioids. So destigmatization is like the most important thing right now, and bringing awareness to the fact that a problem exists. And only when we know a problem exists, and the general public, not just this small sphere of psychedelic psychonauts, only when the general public knows that, we can really, really start to make change and move forward faster. Talia touched on this, that one of the most important parts also is integration. So it's great to talk about Ibogaine. It's amazing, but it's not the cure. It is a step on the path to the cure. And that the integration needs to be highlighted just as much as the Ibogaine itself. Safety of Ibogaine, all of that. But the therapy afterwards and the integration is the biggest part of all of it. So our goal, Ibogaine Research Institute, is to bring awareness to both of those components as being equally important.
Definitely, yeah. So I spend time with the Psychedelic Society of Western New York. We had a volunteer day where we went to contribute to a local organization called Hope Dealers. And basically what we do is, or what that organization specifically does, is pick up used needles throughout the city of Rochester. And I think they go out every week, regardless of the weather, every Sunday. And I think they pick up like 2,000 needles every single week. So it's pretty insane that this is just one city per week what's happening. And we went there as the Psychedelic Society, right? And so many of the individuals there are struggling with addiction, have been sober for possibly several years of time, some only for a few weeks, and are still kind of using this community to be able to continue that sobriety. Talia, I would love to hear your perspectives on how did that conversation happen with you being able to see Ibogaine as a treatment and actually trust that it was another compound, it was another therapy that to someone who is psychedelics naive might believe that, oh, it's just a substitute for something that is already currently affecting me in a negative way?
Thanks for asking that. Yeah, so I believe if I understand the question correctly, you're asking how I help others to believe and how I knew that it was different from all the other solutions. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what's remarkable about Ibogaine, it almost feels like it was put on this planet by God, if you will, or the universe, whatever you want to call it, at this to help humanity with addiction specifically, because it's the only medicine, I think, in the world that takes you from physical withdrawal. When you're in opiate withdrawal, it's miserable. It's like you have an itch from the inside that you can't scratch. You can't sleep for days. You're shitting, you're barfing. You can't think. All you can think about is getting high, right? It possesses you. It is like an entity that takes you over. You work for that thing. It becomes your boss, if you will. So it's remarkable that this thing in 12 hours, you have no desire for this drug, and you're basically, maybe you have 5% withdrawals, maybe you have a little bit of anxiety or a little bit of shaking, but it's basically reduced by 95% the post-acute withdrawals. There's nothing like that on the planet. And that is remarkable to me. And the fact, I think our job as a society, especially for those of us that have been through the dark, is to give back to those that are still suffering and help them alleviate suffering. That's what the Buddha talked about, right? And so this is a real solution that the science is there. You can easily see black on white that you're sick. Most people have to go through, a month or 2 months of these withdrawals, and then they don't make it past those couple months because the physiological desire to get high, the craving is so great. But Ibogaine, while not a magic bullet, gives you that, it's like 90 days ahead of everyone else in one night. So you can actually then focus. You're no longer looking for the drug. You no longer, feel like a piece of shit or whatever the story is that comes with also the craving. You can transcend these traumas and the physical pain and actually work on your recovery. So that is, I think, huge. It's huge. And if given properly and done, with the proper medical teams and proper protocols, I mean, it can get a lot of people back to themselves. Everyone has their own unique mission in life, and their own unique gifts. It can help people get back to that and then be useful to society and actually, be of service. And even from a political economic perspective, begin to generate income and begin to do good for the economy, if you will. So that's huge. And there's nothing like that. And it's very apparent to see, somebody who's very sick. All these other drugs are plants, not drugs, well, whatever you want to call them, ayahuasca and, peyote or whatever. They're great. And they're great for harm reduction and anxiety and depression. And they can help with addiction, of course. But it doesn't show you that black and white change from physically addicted and probably not going to stop to not needing this, that physical change in a single night. So I do think it's remarkable in that way. And then, there's other things, more. So we're called Ibogaine Research Institute because there's more research needed on this plant. I can't believe there's only been a few very basic studies done in the US and other parts of the world. I mean, there hasn't been enough research on something that works so obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I get very passionate. Yes, thanks for asking my question.
Definitely. And certain startups that are coming into the space, MindMed just IPO'd recently, they're looking at, compounds that are similar to Ibogaine, like 18MC, for instance. And one of the things that they talk about is, the tripless treatment. So not necessarily having, the visual and auditory effects that come with the psychedelic, specifically Ibogaine, to be able to, go forward in the experience. I was wondering, for the both of you, how impactful was the, visual and auditory components of the experience? Do you think it could have been effective without those pieces, or were those pieces necessary for your treatment, just from your own perspective?
Yeah, so I don't know everyone's different, but from my own perspective, I believe, of course, that the trip is very important to the experience of wanting to change your life. Because we know that addiction is a very complex set of deeper issues, like the genetic and the spiritual, needing something outside of yourself to fill the hole constantly, and seeking constantly, and not being okay with your inside as well as the physical parts. So for me, the trip itself showed me, for me personally, I was able to get out of my own fears and trauma, which I was stuck in my whole life. I was sort of born into this family, and, I'm not a victim, but I was unable to get out of it, even with a lot of talk therapy. Ibogaine and psychedelics do this in general, take you out, bird's eye view, and you're able to process, and you're able then to see humanity and humanity's suffering and humanity's, beauty. And I was able to go back to the Holocaust and see the suffering there and have compassion for actually the Nazis and crazy things I could have never done, which helped release a lot of my traumas, I think, and childhood traumas. So the trip, I had this spiritual awakening, found, a higher power, and was essentially reborn in a single night. Now, I don't know, I'm not a researcher, and I do believe that that's important though, but maybe, I'm also a harm reduction activist, and maybe, I'm curious to see what the research will show with MC18, and maybe that is another way, a softer way. I'm not sure, but I do, for me personally, I think it's very easy to put on a patch, and, overcoming addiction, usually there needs to be a transformation that occurs. I think Einstein said you can't solve a problem in the same realm that it was created in, something like that. Or maybe it was Buckminster Fuller, I can't remember. But essentially, yeah. So the transformation that happens here is coming from a higher experience that transforms the darkness into the light, if you will. I don't know how that would work through a patch without the trip. I mean, I don't know. So that's just like an opinion of one, though.
Definitely.
So my take on that, I'll hop in, is I've never experienced Ibogaine myself, so I can't speak to that. But from a bird's eye view of this whole industry, I liken it to like I love my fresh pressed green juice. But what if I can't get my fresh pressed green juice? Can I get a vitamin? Can I get a vitamin that has the same stuff? Now, maybe that is not as effective, or maybe it is, but maybe it is an alternative and it's better than not having it. So I think there's still so much research to be done in this space, but I think no matter what, we're all on the same track of wanting to make addiction recovery accessible. So that's my take on that, at least.
Definitely. Well, one of the things during our last conversation y'all were talking about is basically, having a really strong working group of women that you're working with. I believe it was on healing, on entrepreneurship, and kind of everything around this ecosystem. I was hoping that both of you could talk about particularly the struggles of females in regards to the psychedelic ecosystem, and also in more of the broader mental health space. What are some of those struggles, and how has that group that you're involved with and growing yourselves been able to counteract some of those difficulties?
You have the best questions. I'm always amazed. Ashley, do you want to take that one?
I mean, I'm finding that it's not a struggle. The more we're starting to speak more and be more involved, and we're meeting more and more amazing women in the space. And it reminds me of the event we did last week or 2 weeks ago, I don't remember, the feminine spirit of mycelium. When you're open and connecting and knowing that we're all going forward in the same way, that there isn't a struggle. The teams work together. One is, the trip is necessary. One is, no, we don't need the trip. It doesn't matter. Like I said before, it's the path. We're all going toward the same way. So I don't feel a struggle. Maybe I'm naive.
I think it feels very fluid, and that's, I think, the feminine way. And, obviously men too can have that, embody that feminine spirit. I think ideally we have a good mix of masculine, feminine, whether that's allowing or, getting shit done. We want both. And I do think, though, in the past, there's been a lot of women in this world that have been marginalized, whether they're scientists or doctors or activists. And it feels like that's changing. Well, we know it's changing. We partner with all kinds of people who have the funding, people who are doing innovative work as scientists who are women, and we see the change. We see the change happening, and as Ashley said, it doesn't feel like a struggle. It feels very natural, and I don't know. It's the time is now, for sure.
Yeah, that's beautiful and incredible to hear. I'm not sure if this next question either of you two can speak to, but I would love to hear your perspectives. I know that there's, an immense amount of, either rich folks or investors who are eyeing land, especially throughout South America, buying up pieces to be able to grow things like ayahuasca, to be able to grow things like Ibogaine. I was wondering if either of you could talk to specifically, I guess, land acquisition, getting into kind of, especially if it applies to West Africa and Gabon, even there in that region, if either of you can speak to that. But would love to hear about some of the struggles there, whether that's something that you've heard about being done, how that's been happening. Because for me personally, I've only heard it in respect to South America and the Amazon, but I'm wondering if it's happening in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm no expert on this, so really the answer is I don't know, and I just try and have a beginner's mind, but there are people who have come to us who have both the funding and they also have, their heart seems to be in the right place, like they're setting up the structures within their organization to both fund this, and obviously they're investors, they want a return on their investment, and that's part of how we make this industry sustainable, right? We have, from a business woman's perspective, we have to reinvest to be able to innovate and grow, but they're also setting it up so that nonprofits and people on the ground, for example, in South America or Gabon, the indigenous people are going to be empowered and have funds coming back to them to support their community. So that is happening. And I think that's really awesome, actually. So everybody, we believe in the full loop system, right? From part of why we're in such dire dire times right now with the things from a bird's eye view. We're not looking at the whole system, like the whole supply chain. So to be able to cultivate and grow in Gabon and not just extract like the white man has done for centuries, and be able to be more, quite frankly, use the feminine spirit of collaboration to, not just deal the money out to the people, but actually collaborate with them and let them run the operation and let them dictate how things happen, so that's really exciting. And we see that happening too. It's beginning to happen. I can't speak to what's happening in South America. I mean, I've seen some of that, and obviously it's all about intention and how business structures are set up. And there's some people that aren't doing it with a pure intention, and there's others that are bringing this sort of, we call it the middle way model or the third way model in, and really considering others in the community and the reverence for the indigenous wisdom that has come before us, that made it so that these plants and rituals from these plants, and we believe we must support and collaborate. Again, it comes back to that sort of feminine mycelium spirit conversation. So I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe Ashley has a few points on this. She usually does. She's very smart.
So yeah, I and we can't personally speak to the land acquisition specifically, but we are thankfully encountering people in this industry that are starting to, realize that we are stewards to the planet, to the plants themselves. Like, this is all possible because of the plants. And indigenous cultures knew that. I mean, there are rituals around it. Ibogaine is actually, sacred. So it's important that these companies, no matter what they're doing, they are giving back and making sure that the communities that make the plant possible can still thrive.
Definitely. Yeah. And, I feel like every one of these other compounds, people are talking about what's the, decriminalized, what's the recreational even market going to look like for that. Does that conversation happen in the Ibogaine space? Is there kind of a, conversation at all about like what this looks like to be able to consume with friends, or, in a way that's less formal or less therapeutic, or just because of the nature of the therapy, it doesn't look like that conversation's happening?
Much less, I would say. I think some people, we know people that use it for maybe, it's not something that you want to do like ayahuasca every month, or more regular for therapeutic psychospiritual uses, but there's certainly people that do it once or twice every 5 years that I know of. It's not something that you do in a group. It lays you out. You're basically in a coma-esque state for a while. You can't move for many, many hours. So no, I would say no, not in general, but there are people that use it, of course, to progress on or evolve on their spiritual path. It's much more rare. It's much more easier to go to an ayahuasca ceremony and do it with a group than part of the problem is how expensive it is too. So it's not that accessible or scalable. Like if you go to an ayahuasca ceremony with 20 people, it's much more dangerous also, so I think the answer is not really.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, I would love to, we're running short on time, but I would love to give y'all the stage. If there's anything that you would want the psychedelics community to know about the things that you're building, or things you want folks to be more aware about, more sensitive to, more in tune with, would love for the both of you to share.
Sure. Yeah. So we're always looking to talk to researchers and doctors, scientists in the space to be able to partner on any innovations or new research. So that's awesome. That would be awesome. We know quite a few people, but we don't know everyone. And so that would be great. Also, we are putting together, I think Ashley mentioned something called ibogaine.me, which will, since we're marketers, this film will probably come out, and in the next few years, Ibogaine is going to become much more known and popular, and right, the demand is going to increase. So we want to build a resource that's completely free, you know, and for the community to help send people to places that are trustworthy, but also, and perhaps just as important, have a resource guide for quality aftercare that's also accessible, whether it's virtual or in person, different price points around, you know, helping people to stay sober after they get sober, because that's its own ball of wax. So yeah, there's that. Anything else, Ashley?
I think that's it. So yeah, we're always welcoming additional integrative therapists to work with for iboguide.me. And we're always wanting to hear more about more teams and researchers, because we do have people that want to fund certain aspects, and we are happy to make those connections. So reach out to either of us.
Yes, we're like the mycelium network, making connections.
Yes.
Often.
Beautiful. Well, Talia, Ashley, thank you so much for sharing your time and your perspectives with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
We appreciate it. Best of luck with everything today.
Yeah, be well. Talk soon.
Thank you.